Welcome to the Planning and Land Use Management Committee, the Edward R. Roybal Public Works Chamber. Been joined by the Honorable Council Members Jack Weiss and Jose Huizar. Today we're going to do Land Use Management Committee a little different in that we are focused on one subject, and that is the subject of industrial, residential, commercial, mixed uses in the city of Los Angeles. And the intent is going to be to try to establish some clarity, some direction, try to establish some level of predictability and hopefully confidence in all the stakeholders in the direction this city should be evolving into, given all the different variables that affect our environment from a market point of view, from a neighborhood point of view, from an environmental, and on and on. So I want to thank the entities that have shown up today and hopefully provide us some insight, perspective as to the priorities and the impacts. And this committee will be forwarding a few questions for the planning department to answer within 30 days, and hopefully put on the record how we're going to be approaching some of these issues that can be fairly complicated. So I want to again thank you for your patience. We have asked certain groups to speak for 5 minutes. Some of the stakeholders that were involved in this process for the past couple of years. And then we have quite a few cards, and we're going to condense those to 2 minutes. All the items on the agenda will be taken under one action. There are a couple that we will note and file. One of the items that we want to move, and if the votes are there, we can move that towards forward to council. We have a placeholder for that one. And so again, for me, this is a process of creating a great understanding, establishing a sense of direction, and creating clarity as to how we're addressing these issues. So I'll be asking our Director, Gail Goldberg, to give us her presentation, what, 10 minutes?
10 to 15.
10 to 15. Mr. Spivak as well. I know he's present, so if he wants to add anything or answer questions, I appreciate you being here, Mr. Spivak. I know you're here somewhere. There you are. Thanks, sir. The Office of Councilmember John Perry will be asking, I believe we have a representative here. We'll have 5 minutes to present their letter and their land use map as they see it. Councilman Huizar, I'll be asking him to give his introductory remarks or comments as he sees fit. And Councilmember, that's enough? We're not going to hear any pearls of wisdom from Councilmember Jack Weiss? Okay. We'll be hearing from the Central City East Association, Stella Lopez for 5 minutes. Carol Schatz from the Central City Association for 5 minutes. The Downtown Neighborhood Council for 5 minutes. The Linear Cities Development as well. And we've also invited Jack Kaiser or Bill Allen, so I'm not sure if they're in the audience. It'd be great to hear from them as well. And then we have a whole list of cards that will condense down to 2 minutes each. Any comments or any observations, Councilmember? No? Okay. Director Goldberg.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to come here and talk to you about something that I care a lot about, and obviously all of you do too, and that's our industrial land in the city of Los Angeles. I'd like to spend a few minutes to provide some background, to talk a little about what we have discovered over the past couple of years as we have studied this topic. I want to talk about the memo that we sent to our staff. I'm going to talk briefly about the clarification of that memo, and then I'm going to end with a little bit of a discussion about the community plans. But let me share with all of you, as many of you know, I've only been here the last couple of years, but this discussion actually began around the year 2000, when discussion began to occur at the City Council level about concerns around applications for converting industrial land. There was growing discussion about the loss of industrial land in Los Angeles, and around 2003, the then mayor appointed an advisory group who, after studying the topic for a period of time, advised the city to do four things: encourage industrial development activity in the city of Los Angeles, retain and optimize the use of the city's industrially zoned land, increase the number of quality jobs available to local residents, and increase the city's revenues from industrial activity. But by December of 2005, the discussion was still ongoing about the continued loss of industrial land, and at that point, Mayor Villaraigosa issued a directive requesting that the CRA and the Planning Department review and analyze the use of industrial land, especially in light of the number of land use conversions of industrial land to residential and office. I, in my great sense of good timing, of course, arrived about that time. So my first assignment as Director of Planning was to engage in this study of our industrial land use. Over the following 2 years, the staff of the CRA and the Planning Department, with the help of some consultants, looked at the existing land use in our industrial areas that we believed were the most impacted by conversion. We did not look at industrial land throughout the city, but we looked at industrial land in the greater downtown area, Westlake, Central City, Boyle Heights, South and Southeast LA, in Hollywood, and in West Los Angeles. We talked to community stakeholders, we did interviews with industrial business owners, and we actually went out and surveyed how the industrial land was being used, who was in the building, how many jobs, how many businesses. It was simply a data collection that we did. What we found from that data collection and from the analysis was that only 8% of the city's total land area is zoned for industrial use. Only 8%, that's 19,000 acres in our entire city, and of that 8%, more than a quarter of that is being used for uses other than industrial. And that Los Angeles County is our largest manufacturing center in the nation. We found that Los Angeles has the highest demand for industrial space in the country, that the vacancy rate for industrial land is 1% in our downtown and less than 2% elsewhere in Los Angeles, that 25% of the jobs in this city are industrial, that these jobs support 270,000 households and 790,000 people. Of the areas surveyed, and we only looked at 3,300 acres, those 3,300 acres contained 11,000 firms with 83,000 employees. The strategic importance of industrial land was also an issue in terms of our LA economy. In 2006, industrial areas in greater downtown alone generated $10 billion in gross receipts, and these jobs contributed $219 million annually in taxes to the city. It is 13% of our general fund. These jobs are also extremely important for the workforce in Los Angeles. They are jobs that provide a gateway to the middle class. The industrial jobs pay on average 1.5 times what retail jobs pay. They provide a job and career ladder and skill building. They also provide jobs for our Los Angeles' diverse workforce. Within 1 mile of downtown, a high percentage of people work in these downtown jobs. They are very transit dependent and they are less formally educated. These jobs have a multiplier effect unequaled by retail, office, or service jobs. And in the past 25 years, and this is really, I think, an important statistic, Los Angeles has added more than 1 million new residents, but has actually lost 57,000 jobs. Our job housing balance in 1997 was 1.41, and it's projected to be 1.16 in 2025. There is, as we all know, a demand also for housing. And what we have seen is that there has been a demand to build housing in industrial areas. The point I think that we wanted to make from a planning perspective is that housing can be built throughout the city. There is plenty of residential and commercially zoned land for residential. Housing that is built on cheaper industrial land has not resulted in more affordable housing. We also believe that land speculation is driving up the cost of industrial land for businesses and driving them out of Los Angeles. And we need to provide more confidence to investors. And we also need to remember that while some jobs can take a mix of uses, some cannot. Some land needs to be reserved for industrial zoning and needs to be preserved without the intrusion of housing. This also has an impact on our long-term development of the city. We are looking in our economic development strategy to bring in emerging sectors to create new jobs in the city. And we need to be attracting those sectors where Los Angeles has an advantage, but we need to make sure that when we attract them here, that we have land and a place for them to locate and a place for them to grow. We also need to remember that all of our other departments that provide infrastructure and provide amenities for the city do so based on the plans that we adopt, and they do so based on the placement of land uses in those plans. Schools, sewers, stormwater management, street capacities are all based on where the housing is placed and the density of the housing. We also wanted to remind folks that when we convert industrial land to housing on a project-by-project basis, we do not create neighborhoods. It dissipates resources from where they're needed. When we started this process, I thought that it would be fairly simple, that we would look at the industrial land and we would say, wow, it either is viable, good industrial land and we should preserve it because every policy in this city, the general plan, the framework plan, the community plans, all contain the policy preserve industrial land. I thought that we would find land that either was still viable, or I think we recognized from the beginning that when we surveyed the land, we would find that because of decisions made in the past, and because we had already noted that many of the industrial properties were being used by other things, that we would find property that was no longer viable for industrial use, and we would recommend that a certain portion of land go ahead and be converted even prior to new policy planning opportunities. But what we found was it was a bit more complicated than that. We did, of course, find that there was land where there was plenty of viable industrial uses, and we concluded that those should be preserved. We also found land where there was so much intrusion of other uses that we no longer believed it viable, and we did say there are specific areas where we think we should go ahead and convert it. But we also found areas where the kinds of industrial uses existed where we believed that the jobs could still be maintained and perhaps even supported by a mix of uses. So we did find some areas where we thought that even now we could introduce a mix of uses without destroying the viability of those industrial uses. And then we found another interesting category of land where we believed that we had earlier, years ago, simply made a mistake in terms of our zoning. More than 20 years ago in South LA, we decided to convert residential land to industrial. And over the past number of years, the residential neighborhoods remain but have the intrusion of only a few industrial uses. When we looked at those, it seemed to us that it made sense for us to consider converting those back to residential and to begin to try to get rid of the incompatible industrial uses that had found their way into these residential neighborhoods. And so here we were. These are the things that we found. And we also had, by this time, 2 new general managers. And one of the things that I had worked very hard on in my first 2 years here was to really introduce the concept of good community plans. Community plans unlike any community plan that have been created in this city before. Community plans that were comprehensive, that talked about a much more detailed mix of land uses, that talked about infrastructure, that talked about amenities, that talked about urban design, that talked about neighborhood character, that talked about transportation and improvements, really good comprehensive community plans that came with all of the implementing tools. And we were supported by the City Council, who have continued to support our efforts to do 12 community plans at all times, to do a rotation of plans so that in a 9 or 10-year period we go through all of our plans and start again. And we are currently doing 12 community plans. 1/3 of the city is being planned as we speak. And all of the communities that we looked at in terms of industrial use, with the single exception of the Central City North, all of the other industrial areas that we looked at currently have a community planning process underway that we believe will give us the opportunity to look comprehensively at any additional changes that anyone would like to suggest or put on the table as we move forward. We believe that this is the best way for us to deal in this interim period. And frankly, during this interim period, as we are doing the community plans, this land use survey allows us, it's provided as sort of guidance for planners, but literally allows planners to convert or consider converting 20% of the land that we looked at. This, from my perspective, was a huge amount, and frankly, I was a little surprised that other people were not as excited about these new opportunities as I thought they would be. So we sent out a memo to our staff and indicated that based on these land use surveys, in the interim prior to new community plans, that these surveys could provide some guidance for them in terms of looking at land use changes. And I need to remind everyone that nothing in our memo suggested that we would not, as we always have, accept any application for a zone change that comes in. The land use survey might give you some indication as to what the planning department's recommendation might be. It's not conclusive, but it would not preclude a land use change from going through the process, and it would ultimately end up with the decision maker, who is the City Council, on all land use matters. So this memo to staff was meant to give them guidance, as we do in almost every planning process, until we got to the community plans, which are upcoming. But after we sent out the memorandum, I realized, based on the phone calls, the emails, and the motions that were passed, that the memo that we had sent to staff was not only not clear and not easily understood by folks who were not planning staff or CRA staff, but it really left some very serious misunderstandings and misperceptions, and I frankly take total responsibility. I have told anyone who would listen it was pretty much of a rookie mistake. When you send out a memo that is going to have broad public review, you really need to make sure that it is read from that perspective, and we were not careful enough in how we worded the memo to make it clear enough. So I sent out a clarification memo that dealt with what I believe to be the three major misunderstandings. The first being that there was a sense from many people that the planning department and the CRA were establishing a new policy. And the reality is we were simply providing some guidance to staff about how to deal with an existing city council policy, which is very clear in its direction to preserve industrial land. The second misunderstanding, I think, is part of the first. The second misunderstanding was that in our discussion in the memo of community benefits that might be asked of folks who were converting land, there was an impression that the planning department was going to begin to impose these kinds of community benefits that weren't necessarily land use related. And I have had to clarify that the planning department has no legal ability to impose community benefits except where there is an identified mitigation, and it has to be a land use mitigation in the CEQA document. We have no ability in planning to do anything more than that. We did not have before the memo, and we have no different authority since the memo. So I wanted to be clear that the discussion around community benefits really was directed to the CRA, who does have the authority and who does regularly impose these kinds of community benefits. The third and the last clarification and sort of my last remarks have to do with the impression that many people gained from the memo that the planning department and the CRA were predetermining the outcome of the community planning process, and I wanted to assure anyone who would listen that is not the case. It is our intention in the community planning process to create community plans that are embraced as consensus plans by the community and that go to a city council who is embracing these plans. It is never our intention to bring forward plans that are not embraced by the community and by the city council. We will not be successful if we do that. So we are open in the community planning process to looking at ways to implement this policy in ways that one can only do in a comprehensive way. In the community plan, one has the ability to move land uses, to intensify job production in certain areas, to change from job producing to other uses in other areas. It's an opportunity for us to look at the infrastructure needs and to really begin to support the industrial use that everybody has bought into. And I think I will end with that by assuring everyone that while I know that you have no experience with the kind of plans I'm talking about, I assure you that the new community plans that come forward will have the ability to do many of the things that many of the industrial users and the property owners are talking to me about. They have often talked to me about the need for infrastructure to support the jobs that we want to bring in. They have talked to me about design issues, how to make neighborhoods better. And within the community planning process, I believe that we have the ability to do those things in ways that can never be achieved in a project-by-project decision-making process. So I'm asking you to be patient with us, to engage in the community planning process, and I am assuring the council members that I am open to looking at all of the ideas that they have for the mix of employment land and other uses in their communities. And it is predictability that we are trying very hard to bring you with what I continue to tell you is this is real planning.
Thank you, Director Goldberg. One of the questions that come to mind is, through your website, can we find out exactly where the community plan process is today in terms of what's been covered, what will be covered, given the range of concerns that the different stakeholders have expressed since this memo came out?
Right, absolutely. There is a status of the community plans on our website. I have talked to several of the council members, and we are certainly open to holding special meetings for some of the industrial owners to talk to people about how it is that we look at the land within the industrial area. So we're certainly open to doing that.
There's a set of questions I have that I wanted to put forth, but I think we should, as a committee, listen to what the stakeholders need to say, have to say, and hopefully can stick around to hear these presentations.
I'm not leaving till the last person leaves.
Thank you. Okay, that being said, any questions, my colleagues of the director? Okay, we'll move forward. I'd like to invite Councilor Perry's office. We do have Mr. Fisher with us, and that microphone is yours, sir. One thing that I just want to share with the folks here is that I did go to every council member and I did ask them that for this committee, if they were so inclined to provide a map in which they wanted to be absolutely clear what industrial zones should not be touched, which industrial zones should not be considered for any type of transition, and to provide us their sense of priorities given the discretionary nature of the recommendations, because we know the recommendations provided by Director Goldberg are based on what the general plan allows. And so in so much as their discretion exists, what is the discretion of the council in terms of their perspective of how they see their own district? So I did ask every council member to submit that map, and so thank you, Council Member Perry's office, Mr. Fisher, for responding and providing us this insight.
Thank you, council members. Greg Fisher with the Office of Councilwoman Jan Perry. I have a memorized speech, but in order to keep you from listening to me yammer on, I will read it. The map you see before you is the last by-tract map of the city of Los Angeles, drawn in 1907 by Felix Violet, whose family founded the Tay Frere restaurant on Sunset Boulevard. I will point out some of the pieces on here. It's an 11-piece map, which I've badly cobbled together. Up here you have Councilman Reyes' Elysian Park. You have the Los Angeles River over here. This is Main Street, and down here for reference, that is Exposition Park.
You did say 1907, right?
1907, the date is right there.
Okay, I know there's a reason for showing us a map that old, right?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
The city of Los Angeles, titled El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora, la Reina de Los Ángeles de Porciúncula, was founded in 1781 and is the second oldest city in Alta or Upper California. On a mission timeline, Los Angeles would rank number 9 in terms of age among the 21 missions. It is the second of 2 cities in Alta California founded with a royal charter from King Carlos III of Spain. Therefore, it has a longer story to tell as a city than all but one other city in the state of California. The 1849 survey of Los Angeles, conducted by Lieutenant Edward Ord for the United States government, showed the streets of the small town. They began with Calle Principal, or Main Street, and proceeded west. There were no streets east of Main Street because Main Street was a high point, and the river floodplain sloped down to the east from Main toward the river. East of Main was therefore less desirable for building. Just after the Civil War, Phineas Banning, who ran the stage line from San Pedro to Los Angeles, began to operate the first rail line in the county, the Los Angeles and San Pedro Railroad. It ran down the middle of what we now call Alameda Street. This alignment was made parallel to the Los Angeles River and explains why the streets cut across many of the other streets downtown. Los Angeles fought for and won transcontinental rail service through the Southern Pacific Railway in 1876 and the Atchison and Topeka and Santa Fe Railway in 1895. This orange line is Southern Pacific on Alameda. This orange line is Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe on Santa Fe Avenue. Los Angeles was the only city on the West Coast with two transcontinental lines, SP and ATSF. Local traction companies also located in this less desirable area east of Maine. These were independent firms that were swallowed up before World War I into Henry Huntington's electric car line system over here. All of these rail lines, local and national, are depicted along the Los Angeles River in yellow with spurs, sidings, through lines, maintenance yards. I've noted them all without prejudice as to Council Districts 1, 9, or 14. You will be able to see another rail line on the southern or lower part of the map. This was the Los Angeles and Independence Railroad, which was built in 1875. It is the successor line is Expo Rail. It was designed to connect downtown Los Angeles with the new resort town of Santa Monica. If you make a comparison of the VOA map here with the city department maps titled Central City North, Alameda, Southeast Los Angeles, and the map Chinatown, Central City North, Central City North, Chinatown, you will not fail to note that the current industrial commercial zones were plotted along the rail lines and on top of an enormous number of 19th century residential tracts. The City Planning Department made these changes in the 1920s when a larger downtown commercial district was needed in response to the addition of the enormous water supply made possible by the Mulholland-engineered Owens Valley Aqueduct. City planning rezoned the Victorian housing out of downtown from Figueroa Street to the river and south to Washington Street. I'm from here, and I can't remember seeing transit or rail service on any of these lines. We are preserving a policy of commercial industrial land use in amber that has no basis in 21st century Los Angeles. We have condemned literally thousands of parcels to a zoning designation that has no connection to the present. The Pacific Electric system stopped running in the early 1960s, and with the opening of Union Station in 1939, the other rail lines leading to the separate depots became obsolete. If you use the analogy that I used at the City Planning Commission of the horse having gotten out of the barn on this one, then I can extend it further to state that the horses jumped the fence and run off and died decades ago. The corral and the barn and the farm were sold and subdivided. There is no trace of the thing ever having existed. And yet, we continue to push this concept long after the commercial industrial base left downtown for Vernon, City of Commerce, City of Industry, and later the Inland Empire. We have an awkward 19th century street system here that was designed for horses and carriages. There's no ability to get an 18-wheeler off a freeway with any ease. There are no infrastructure or improvements in the works or even planned to accommodate the kind of large-scale operations that are used for today's model. Assembly of the small residential plots into enough critical mass to make a comfortable setting for commercial or industrial land use are nearly impossible in this particular area. Any of the areas actually along any of these rail lines. The market has spoken. These uses have moved on. The Councilwoman has submitted a letter for your consideration, and I ask that you keep her points in mind while making your own findings. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher, when you look at the statements made by the director in terms of how we move forward on these discretionary issues, I believe we are in year 2 of a 3-year community plan for the area you're concerned with?
We're in year 2 of this community planning process. We have the maps. We have directed the staff to make these a part of the community planning process, and I know that as of last Saturday at the public meeting in South and Southeast LA, this was discussed and was the topic with both the council member and the community. So, yes.
So, Mr. Fisher, we want to make sure that, at least from this chairperson's perspective, the priorities of the council office will always be heard and processed on a case-by-case basis. We know the mapping of these areas needs to continue to evolve. We're 1 year out. So I'm hoping that between now and then, we can continue to establish a sense of to reinforce confidence in those projects and or investors that are in your area, so that we can say we have some predictability, that we can say we have a direction, and that we can eliminate that ambiguity given these discretionary measures that are before us.
I believe the councilwoman is comfortable at this particular time with the direction that the planning department is trying to take, and is most willing to work with the department to see that those common ends are met.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, I'm being advised here.
The only thing I would note and highlight is Central City North Community Plan is not funded, so that's still a lot of work that we need to tackle through the community plan.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so
And that is a portion of the downtown area.
but 2 years it's evolved to the extent that we've completed 2 years of a 3-year community plan program. It's the third year that you're
no,
saying?
we're about halfway through. We're in the second year of the community planning process.
Right now, Southeast Los Angeles, that community plan area below the 10 freeway, that started its second year in the community plan process. Central City, I believe, is in its first year, and they're just starting public outreach. Central City North has not been funded yet and not started.
Okay, and that
Or
covers
Chinatown.
areas of concern. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Budget guys. All right.
I will assure everyone that our recommendation for the plan that will start next year as Hollywood comes off and we add a new plan, our recommendation is that Central City North be the next plan. And so far, we have had a commitment to continue the 12-plan rotation.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker will be Carol Schatz from the Central City Association. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving us the opportunity. This is a very important issue for the continued revitalization of downtown, for the whole city as well. And I also would like to thank Councilmember Huizar and Councilmember Perry for their leadership on this issue. We agree and work closely with Planning Director Gail Goldberg on many issues, and we agree with real planning. We don't agree with spot zoning, and we don't agree that property owners get to build whatever they want, whenever they want, wherever they want. And Central City Association, as you know, which can be a very strong advocate for business, has never and will never be guilty of not supporting appropriate job growth in the right places. But we believe this is not, that we have to oppose this on several grounds. First of all, we do believe this is a new policy. Because the city has, for more than 20 years that I have been downtown, pretty much allowed on a case-by-case basis and in broader context, changes to the industrial use premise that's in the general plan. We all want to preserve industrial jobs, but we have allowed a lot of a conversion of these areas over the last 20 to 30 years. And certainly what's going on in the Arts District and those changes there it lets us know that that's what we have been doing anyway. It creates, this directive creates 4 new categories or overlay zones for industrial land use and calls for more restrictive applications of existing zoning regulations that are authorized under the municipal code. And each zone has new regulations in addition to what exists in the zoning code. You can no longer submit applications for rezones in the new employment protection districts, and certain projects in the new transition districts must be accompanied by undefined community benefits. We do disagree. We think that what has been in existence is a moratorium. And we have about $1 billion of investment, $1 billion of investment that's either been delayed, is walking away because of the interim moratorium that is in essence has existed for the last couple years since the first memo from Bud Overham came down. And as I have said to many council members in this last several weeks, you have afforded small projects in your district more respect in terms of forcing the developer to meet with homeowners in the district than, unfortunately, the entire downtown community has been afforded by this process. We have had only 2 meetings with the planning department, one real meeting in your conference room, Director Goldberg, and when this much is at stake, we think more input was absolutely essential. You're going to be hearing about the fact that the Hahn administration, where this policy was initiated, basically dropped the issue because they determined that to really create this policy, they would have had to aggregate all kinds of small parcels and provide infrastructure, and they knew that the city didn't have the money to do it, or the time. So we're talking about underutilized parcels that cannot handle these new concepts of new blue-collar jobs. And we are very concerned that the city has general ideas about the kinds of jobs they want to attract by preserving this land, but we don't see anything specific. And when you're talking about blocking $1 billion in investment, you better be able to tell us, in our view, which companies you're going after, how many jobs they're going to bring, and that they're going to be able to bring them in a few months. Otherwise, I don't think the city, especially in the slowing residential market, can afford to leave $1 billion, at bay, or just gone altogether. The city is using these economics, this data that talks in general about vacancy rates and jobs, and they're trying to cram that into some square blocks of downtown. It doesn't fit to cram that data into these blocks. This data, we know that jobs have left. The manufacturing jobs have left. 1, because of China. 2, because they are moving to Vernon and other places, and our workforce is still here making those travels. So we ask you to listen carefully to the kinds of jobs that have been created and realize that a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, and right now we think this is pie in the sky economics.
Thank you, makes sense.
Thank
you very much. Okay, next is Estela Lopez with the Central City East Association.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Estela, if I may, just for a second, there's another name here, Mark.
Mark Shinbane, yes.
Did you want to split the 5 minutes with him?
Correct.
So 2.5 and 2.5?
We could probably take 6 minutes, 3 and 3.
Always negotiating.
We'll do the best
Let's
we
go
can.
2.5 and 2.5. If I start with 1, that's a slippery slope. So we'll stick with 2.5 and 2.5.
Thank you very
All right.
much. And before I get started, and before my time starts to run, I just want to clarify that the statistics that we're going to put forth may sound a little different than from what Director Goldberg did, only because, and she pointed out the greater downtown and the areas that you studied were much larger than the traditional downtown that I will be referring to in my remarks. Okay, thank you. The Central City East Association has been the principal advocate for Eastern Downtown Los Angeles for 23 years. Today we represent 110 blocks, 1,100 property owners, and 3 business improvement districts. Virtually all of our 110 blocks are industrially zoned. We represent the employers who created the jobs that were the gateway to the middle class. We represent the people who have invested billions of dollars in an area where, frankly, the city invests very little. These same property and business owners have spent lifetimes building industrial businesses in downtown, and they know that they are the last generation likely to do so. The economic obstacles are overwhelming. tiny parcels, aging building stock, inadequate loading docks, no setbacks, narrow streets, crumbling infrastructure. More than 50% of job applicants in the area abandon their interviews when they see the neighborhood. Local employers pay 10 to 20% more to get quality employees to work in a blighted and often unsafe area. Land costs, with or without speculative inflation, are at least 5 times higher than in the Inland Empire. Site assembly is an expensive and risky proposition. Aging industrial building stock may go forever unreplaced because modern codes render half of the lots unbuildable. Entitlement and permit processes are more difficult than in other cities. Tax rates, utility rates are increasingly unfavorable. Globalization has resulted in the outsourcing of many blue-collar jobs. Few companies are able to withstand this trend in the face of competition. Mechanization and technology have simply changed the way manufacturing and distribution occur. The national average for a manufacturing and distribution facility requires a minimum of 10 acres. Within the Central Industrial Redevelopment Project area, only two parcels out of 1,100 are 10 acres or larger.
Still got 30 seconds, so go ahead.
72% of parcels in the area are less than half an acre in size. I'd like to introduce Mark Shinbane. Mark is Vice President of Orcal, one of the country's leading shrimp and seafood processors. The Shinbane family has been a part of Central City East for 50 years. They've witnessed the changes in their neighborhood and in their business, and he will talk to you about those.
Thank you. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Stella. We've been located at our present facility on Crocker Street since 1971, and during that time we've expanded approximately 5 times to our present size of about 75,000 square feet. That last expansion occurred in the year 2000. At that point, we were in a volume doing about $100 million a year, employing 150 people. And since that time, our volume as of today is about 200 million. We're moving about 40 million pounds of seafood throughout the United States. The issue here for us is that, as you can see, we are doing it with far fewer people because we are a pure example of what's happened with globalization. We have been forced to cut our workforce down. That 100 million at 150 employees today, we're at 50 employees with 200 million. The problems that we face downtown is essentially we are landlocked. There is no place for us to go. Our business continues to grow. We've essentially become more of a distribution and marketing company. The processing has essentially left. It's economically unfeasible for us to continue doing what we were doing. If we had not made these changes back in the year 2000, we would not be here today. The problems we face downtown, as mentioned by Ms. Goldberg, is the infrastructure downtown is certainly not suitable to our size of industrial business. Today, if we were to build a new facility for distribution and a small processing area, we would need at least 150 to 200,000 square feet. I could tell you there is no place downtown that would be suitable for that, especially with the truck turnarounds that we need. The streets are way too small in downtown. We struggle daily getting our trucks in and out of our loading bays, and also the high cost of land. Even if we were able to afford buying additional property, no matter how cheap it could possibly get downtown here, it still wouldn't be cheap enough to make it economically viable to build a facility that size and have the open space necessary for the trucks. So we face a lot of problems, and one other I just would like to throw it out here while we're here is the fact that we are very concerned about the increases forthcoming from DWP with the 30% increases. So,
30 seconds more, sir. You can continue.
Okay. Essentially it's not when we're going to go, it's essentially where we're going to go when we have to look down within the next couple of years to move our business. We are really going to have no choice. The business continues to grow. We are completely bursting at the seams at our current facility. So it's just very much a big concern down here, and I'd be happy to talk anytime about it further in more detail, some of the issues we face here. Thank you very much.
Sir, and I just wanted to make sure that we invite entities like yourselves, the businesses, as they continue in the community plan process to talk about how do we start establishing these, the nexus between retrofitting our infrastructure, looking at community benefit packages, and working with the council office of the district with the CRA to see how you start establishing these strategies. And that's something I think we can move in that direction. and hopefully we won't be too late.
Anytime, I'd be happy to help you guys out. Thank you.
Thank you.
We passed out a 3-page document of some of the uses that we feel would be part of a mixed-use new-industrial neighborhood for your consideration. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here today. We do have a few more folks in the 5-minute time frame. We have with us Shiraz Tanzri with the Downtown LA Neighborhood Council.
Thank you, Council Member. I'm Shiraz Tangri from the downtown law firm Weston Benchouf. I'm here today as the planning co-chair for the Downtown LA Neighborhood Council, Certified Neighborhood Council. Much of the Downtown Neighborhood Council's boundaries are captured within the industrial survey for Greater Downtown. We also have typically been involved in projects in the Arts District, which are just outside of our borders, but we believe are tied in very strongly to the rest of downtown. I'm handing out a letter that was written several months ago when we first got the policy document. I think a lot of what's in there still weighs true, and a central theme is that what we're dealing with here is a change in policy, and the letter really requests that the Planning Department and CRA continue to engage stakeholders and other parts of the city in an ongoing process as to what we do with our industrial policy, and that the policy memo should not be an end in itself. So we're thrilled that we're here and that the City Council is taking this up, because we think this is a critical policy. It's not just a land use policy, it's economic policy, it's the growth of our city. So let me start with why we think that there's a change in the policy and what the consequence of that change is. The director referred to the general plan policy that supports retention of viable industrial property. There are also competing general plan policies that we think really need to be looked at here, and we think the policy memo prioritizes that policy over other policies. For example, marginal industrial land should be redesignated according to section 3.14.6 of the general plan. The general plan framework goal also has a goal 3G, that talks about enhancing the residential community for downtown. So there are competing goals that need to be balanced, I think, against the overall goal of retaining what's viable. And when you have a policy memo that determines that one goal is prioritized over others, we believe that's a policy determination that should really be made by elected leaders following a full public process. I'd also focus, and there's already been a lot of discussion about this, but the downtown renaissance obviously has recognized that starting with residents coming into downtown, you can also bring in jobs. We don't think, the neighborhood council is certainly not against job growth. In fact, we think they're compatible. And I think if you look at what's already happened in the relatively short number of years since the downtown renaissance restarted, first you had new residents coming in, then you had retail uses coming in, you've had tourism, and there's a lot of attention to the new tourist jobs, retail jobs that are coming in increasingly, entertainment jobs, and then creative jobs. There are a tremendous number, especially in the Arts District, but all around downtown, of new artists, designers, architects. There's Gallery Row. Those are people that are now employed, actively working in downtown, and we'd like to be able to have those people housed downtown as well, where it makes sense to do that. A lot of those creative jobs also require more flexible, non-traditional working space. I don't think you can expect an art gallery to move into an upstairs office space. And I think that brings us to why the Arts District is so important. And what you see happening in the Arts District, or what started happening in the Arts District, is really very similar to what's happened in other cities that have redeveloped their old industrial areas. Philadelphia has done it. The Pearl District in Portland's an example. New York has done this with its harbors and is continuing to do so. It started in Soho and moved to Tribeca. You're seeing that in every major city in our country and elsewhere around the world, and LA should continue that trend. So with those changes in mind, I think what I'd like to just sort of close on here is what the consequence of those changes are. And Carol Schatz alluded to this, but there are people that have relied on the policies, the city's policy direction over time, which has been to allow these conversions, to allow mixed use coming into outdated industrial areas. And the people that have relied on that include residents that have moved over there, these new businesses I refer to, and it does include the developers that have invested in those areas, including major investments in infrastructure, in open space. We've got the river program coming up. That's major investments as well. Obviously, those changes those programs are going to have to be funded. And I think we can't turn our back on people that have been coming into downtown, into different parts of downtown, innovatively, looking for ways to redevelop, put in new uses, and protecting those uses that remain viable. So with that in mind, I would just ask that you take a look at our letter and the recommendations that are there, and which include commencing the Central City North plan approval process or plan update process as soon as possible, looking at the flexibility for joint live-work uses in many parts of downtown, not limited to those areas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, that concludes our 5-minute range of presentations. We'll go down to the 2 minutes. So we'll commence with Brendan Hoffman. Is Brendan here?
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Brendan Huffman with FICA, the Valley Industry and Commerce Association. I just want to make a couple comments. First, we're looking at this more from a Valley perspective than anything else. We are not experts in downtown. I love coming downtown and seeing all the changes that are happening, many of which are positive. What concerns our members, many of which are tenants and owners of the industrial zones, industrial parcels rather, in the Valley, is that we're losing a job housing balance. We're losing middle-class jobs that pay full benefits to property owners who bring in something else that is not compatible. Now, this is, again, from a Valley perspective. I think what is missing here is more discussion about the kind of jobs the city is trying to attract. The Mayor's Jobs Committee did a good job of identifying the job sectors that will promote long-term growth, promote the types of jobs we all want, but that needs to be part of this conversation as well. I think my members would be much more comfortable with this discussion, and we applaud the direction the planning department is going, by the way, but we would be much more comfortable if we had that discussion. What types of jobs are we going after? What industries are we going after? What is the future? We also have to look at what types of tax revenues they generate. When I go into North Hollywood or Warner Center and see businesses that are mixed-use housing that used to occupy where a manufacturing plant was, I wonder what that job pays in that coffee shop. I wonder if they get full benefits. But I also wonder what the tax revenue hit on the city has been. So I hope you all keep that in mind as we move forward, and we look forward to having this discussion in the Valley when the planning department is ready. Thank you.
Great. And you should know the series of questions that have been put together for the planning department of Director Goldberg includes those types of concerns, and we'll hear those responses in 30 days. But today was about listening to you first,
right,
having these introductory comments, these concerns, and moving this discussion forward. So I appreciate your questions, because we are looking at the impacts in San Pedro, because you do have industrial land there. There's sections of Venice, San Fernando Valley on the east side, and on and on. So it's not just a downtown issue, it's a citywide issue within a regional context.
Thank you. And I forgot to mention the concerns about community benefits packages. We'll get to that a little later. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Okay. Next we'll have, I believe it's Yuval Barzemer. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Yuval. I'm with Linear City. Our company developed a couple of projects in the subject area in downtown. I'm here just to give you kind of a perspective from the ground, less statistics and numbers, which I have a problem with the numbers. I have a problem with the statement of only 8% of the city's industrial land, and maybe only 80% of the cities are R1 zoning, and there's nothing else we can add housing or anything else. So I think when somebody comes and starts really analyzing how much land we really need for industrial land or how many jobs we're looking for, a real comprehensive study should come in place. But just from our own personal experience, we've been involved in the industrial part of downtown for many years now. I would say we've been following city policy and ordinance that passed in the mid-'80s when the city realized that there's really no way to utilize the old industrial buildings, and they passed the first ordinance of the artists in residence. Since then, numerous projects went through the pipeline, brought new life to these buildings, as well as jobs, as well as housing, and our two projects are just, two projects that followed similar paths. As an anecdote, the toy factory where I live used to be a toy factory. When we actually purchased a building, company went Chapter 11 because couldn't compete with the Chinese products. Make a long story short, used to be 35 employees in this building. And I think today, after we're done, there's probably 5 times this number of employees. There's jobs, there's new businesses. A lot of the businesses that were described as the future businesses actually start in our ground floor and in our loft, in our live workspace.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Paul Solomon. After Paul Solomon, we'll have Kate Bartolo. And after Kate, we'll have Kent Smith.
Good afternoon. I work with Yuval at Linear City, and I was going to say some similar things to what Yuval said. So I'll jump straight to a plan that we want to suggest as another way to look at the industrial areas of downtown, and it's a plan wherein the opportunity to produce more housing and employment density is also the goal, and it goes something like this. Inside the downtown LA freeway loop, the city should sell air rights to property owners to allow the property owners to build above the 1.5 FAR currently allowed on the industrial zone land. Assuming 40 million square feet of industrial zone land and an increase of 4 FAR and a price of $20 per square foot, the revenue to the city would be $3 billion. To be conservative, if you reduce this by half, and the revenue is $1.5 billion, if the city provided a mortgage subsidy of $100,000 per unit with these funds, the $1.5 billion could be worth 15,000 mortgage subsidized units. In addition, there would be the market rate units created and the additional millions of fees and billions of dollars of investment. The majority of the revenue from this program could be used to, as I said, subsidize mortgages. Some of the revenue could be used to improve manufacturing and transportation infrastructure and to fund parking garages to support added density in the downtown freeway loop. The prioritizing of the subsidies of the mortgages could go to the same projects that purchase the air rights. So essentially, the program that's creating the dollars that are available to subsidize mortgages would also be supporting the same market rate projects. So it's a kind of beneficial cycle.
Mr. Solomon, could you submit what you are proposing in writing? That way we can have it on record. It sounds like a very interesting approach.
Okay.
You should study that.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, Kate Bartolo.
Kate Bartolo and Associates, and a 5-year Artist District stakeholder. I'm here to support the motions that are under consideration today, but also to share an on-the-ground reality. And it is shared by industrial brokers who for nearly 30 years have made their living from industrial referrals. And it is this, that the current system is not broken in the way that it might be inferred that it is. Historically, these have been smaller users, entrepreneurial in nature. They've come in, often they've pulled the home equity from their homes. 5 years ago, they were about 20,000 square feet in size, these industrial users. Today, they range between 5,000 and 10,000 square feet. It's back office, it's warehousing, it's storage. What has been happening is that, given, as the seafood company outlined, the lack of significant parcels, the lack of infrastructure, you cannot expand street size, these entrepreneurs, when they've grown, have left the hubs where they've been, it was originally the motivation. They have gone to outside Los Angeles much of the time. We'd like to see them stay in Los Angeles, but what we need to understand is that system in itself is not broken. There are 5 deep entrepreneurs coming behind them, wanting to get in. And where I think that the on-the-ground reality melds with the vision for the future is this, that those are the kind of users that are compatible with residential. We can do a better job of targeting the kind of users we want to go after, the new economy, the environmental, the green users, and start talking about intensification or densification of existing land in downtown, one of the only areas that really is capable of that growth. And let's marry that reality with the vision. But in the short term, let's not kill hundreds of millions of dollars that are presently at stake in a fairly shaky economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken Smith, and then we'll have Vanessa Rodriguez.
Thank you. My name is Ken Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the LA Fashion District. We represent 82 blocks of downtown east of Main Street and north of the number 10 freeway, the bulk of which is zoned industrial. First of all, we'd like to thank Council Members Jan Perry and Jose Huizar for their leadership on this issue. And we also want to thank Planning Director Gail Goldberg and the CRA for somewhat modifying the mixed use and transition zones to include more of the LA Fashion District. There still is the city market site and the area east of San Pedro that remain in the industrial preservation zone. Our district is no longer an industrial area. Our businesses attract buyers who generate $5.8 billion in economic activity every year. Those buyers are looking for bars, restaurants, and pedestrian-friendly streets that are characteristics of mixed-use districts in downtowns that we are competing with, like New York, Milan, and Paris. Wholesale employment is actually rising in our district. At the very same time, we have doubled the number of residential units in the district. These are higher-paying jobs, and they depend upon buyers having an urban-friendly environment. We do not want to see obsolete industrial uses like the city market with its blank walls facing the street to remain in our district. Preserving industrial land, even in the interim, can have horrific consequences for our district. Recently, a chicken slaughtering house has moved almost adjacent to our showroom area on Crocker Street. This is not the kind of use that buyers are going to find to be very user-friendly. We ask that you support the map, the boundaries of the map that Jan Perry has submitted, and change our district to mixed use. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Vanessa Rodriguez, and then Sandy Bleifer, or Bleifer.
Good afternoon, Vanessa Rodriguez, Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce. We believe this report is a positive first step towards developing a citywide industrial land use policy. However, the Chamber has 2 main concerns. First, the Chamber would like to ensure the proposed policy is properly heard and vetted through this committee and the full City Council. The Chamber supports Councilmember Huizar's motion, which guarantees that the proposed policy undergoes the appropriate approval process. Secondly, the proposal should not include anything related to inclusionary zoning, which is currently referred to in Section 5B of the proposal. This language is a disincentive for businesses to continue operating in these areas. It injects a politically charged issue into this debate that should be discussed separately and at a different time. We suggest the final product recognize the different parts of our city have different needs when it comes to redevelopment and preserving industrial space. One size does not fit all. The opportunities along the LA River are different than the opportunities in downtown, and the needs of downtown are different than the needs of the valley. Our city's industrial land is a precious resource that supports thousands of quality jobs for working class families. We must do everything possible to both preserve existing land and modernize available industrial land in order to meet the existing needs of tenants. The city's ability to attract, develop, and grow biotech, high-tech, clean tech, and entertainment tech industries depends on the amount of industrially zoned land available for these enterprises. Since 1980, Los Angeles has grown by 1 million residents. However, as noted by the Planning Department, the city has 56,000 fewer jobs than it did 27 years ago. As industrial land disappeared, so too did many good-paying middle-class jobs that cannot be replaced by retail development. In fact, research shows that industrial redevelopment creates 4 times as many jobs and 6 times the wage base of a retail center. These are jobs we should be aiming to create. And with that, thank you.
Thank you very much. Sandy Bleifer, then we'll have Lucille Saunders, and then Ed Rosenthal.
My name is Sandy Bleifer. Thank you very much for the privilege of offering some remarks on this important discussion. I'm a real estate broker, and my practice is in downtown, has been downtown for 10 years, and I view this in the context of real estate frame of reference. We have a principle called the highest and best use of land, and that's how land is generally evaluated. Conversely, I think it's important to keep in mind that zoning should support the highest and best use of the land, both from an economic standpoint and a social standpoint, and to do otherwise would be a disservice to the local community. The land can't move, the people can, and you destroy a community if there's an inappropriate use of the land, and you destroy economic values for the private and public entities that own that land. First of all, I would like to also compliment Gail Goldberg and Cecilia Estelano for the wonderful work that they've been doing on our city in coming up with strategies that I think are really effective in creating community, mixed use, and commercial policies. I think that they have been very constructive in that regard. I think we're dealing with a different creature here in industrial land. Industrial land does not act as a magnet for business. Business goes and looks for the shoe that fits. They look for a location. Historically, they've looked for rivers for shipping product and other types of features of locations. But with the new business and new technologies and the prevalence of entrepreneurship, they need different things. I prepared a paper with some more particular suggestions on
Great.
how.
We'll make sure we get copies of that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lucille Saunders from the Melrose Neighborhood Association, and the Melrose Neighborhood Association asks the central question: who is listening to the mayor's stated goals, the planning department's survey and reports, and the economics projections? I haven't heard Jack Kaiser here today, but I've heard him and other economists and other presentations of this proposal. And who is listening to the relevant stakeholders in this community on industrial land use? The Melrose Neighborhood Association has been involved with the planning department both on the industrial land use and with the Hollywood Community Plan. But we were astounded on the 3rd of January to find that an entire La Brea Willoughby block was then to be converted to transitional residential zoning. It is now wholly industrial. It is contiguous from the east and to the west, from the north, with other industrial land uses, especially of the trades. Why is even more of the meager 8% industrial land slated to be converted to even more development? Because a developer bought a plot of this land. It is now in the full EIR process, and now the talk is to convert the whole block. We would ask the Plum, we would ask our elective representatives to demonstrate the best interests of the city and its citizens, and not of special interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ed Rosenthal, Jim McQuiston, and then I believe it's Lab Chief Fan. Is Ed Rosenthal here? Okay. How about Lab Chief Fan? And then Jim McQuiston. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Lapshi Fan. I am the developer of the 2121 Lofts located at 7th Place and Santa Fe in Central City North. The property is a 3-acre property that stretches from the LA River to the 7th Street Bridge to Santa Fe Avenue. And I'm here really to ask Director Goldberg about her decision to cut the boundary at 6th Street and not really include the existing context of the neighborhood south of 7th Street. Really, we have nearing completion now 78 lofts and townhomes, 30,000 square feet of new gardens and courtyards, and we are bringing new jobs and new residents and people to our lofts. We have musicians, artists, architects, photographers, people starting new businesses in the enterprise zone moving into our buildings. We are also improving the infrastructure of the neighborhood. We are adding streetlights, we are adding gutters and sidewalks and a dog park and trees, and also building neighborhoods. You know, we are not only providing residential, we are providing retail spaces for new businesses to move into. And also we are following other guidelines of the city for the LA River greening and the greening of the LA River. We have irrigation that we're building to reduce runoff to the river. We're building a community by the river. So there are a lot of different competing plans from the city that we are working towards trying to build communities and build neighborhoods in this area. 3 out of the 4 corners at 7th and Santa Fe are already residential live-work. The 4th corner is the Imperial Toy Building, which is now sitting vacant, and proposals to turn that into public storage are now being considered. There are no new jobs being brought by those types of uses.
Jafan, I have to ask you to conclude, but what district do you find yourself in?
This is the Central City North in downtown Los Angeles. And we are the southern anchor of the Arts District, and we are paying property taxes to be part of the Arts District.
This is District 9 or District 14?
This is CD 14.
Okay.
And we would not have been able to succeed in our project and without the help of our council member, our council office, and we're very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Jim McQuiston, our last speaker.
Jim McQuiston. I've been an industrialist now in Hollywood for almost 50 years, 49 years. But I can remember getting on the train, Southern Pacific train. If you wanted to go to San Francisco, a porter put a thing down in the middle of Alameda Street, and that was the train station in the middle of Alameda Street. I gave you a statement. It has 5 articles in it. I'm not going to reread them. You all have them. I think this is a very difficult question. There are things that the entire city needs, citywide. What we're not doing is increasing the industrial zones. If we have more population, we need more industrial zones, not less. We need them in blocks because industry is not policed. Remember that. Industry is not policed. That's why we have business improvement districts, because otherwise we get no police response. That means that they have to be compact areas. And if they do not get that, we used to have that on Yale Street, downtown, and CD1. Those people moved out because there was an incursion of residences, and they could not exist. If we want this country not to have to get in cars every day and go to Vernon, as people said, or somewhere else, maybe San Bernardino for a job, we have to preserve our industrial areas. It has to be done properly. Planning is very, very difficult. No one disputes that. Soviet Russia went to pot on account of they couldn't plan. But we don't plan right now. This spot zoning has to stop. The Supreme Court said no more spot zoning, and we, for 30 years, have ignored what the California Supreme Court said. And we do have, as I put in my article, we have some very, very severe cautions.
Thank you, Mr.
Believe
Cuesta.
me, severe cautions.
Thank you, sir. Okay, that concludes the public hearing process. We do have questions, and we want to lay out some of these questions to you in writing, Director Goldberg. And in 30 days, we can visit the answers, depending on the will of the council and my colleagues. If we'll do this openly within a public forum like this, or do we do it just as a report, we'll make the decision. But in 30 days, we'd like to get a response. And just to give you, and just to share with the committee, for example, the questions that we are engaging are, how much of the existing industrial zone property is currently in use by heavy industry? It appears unlikely that attracting new heavy industry will be acceptable to the public, so we want to ask the CRA in the planning, what efforts are underway to develop a comprehensive industrial economic development strategy? Work with the CRA in the planning to report back on types of light industrial businesses, such as biomedical, companies, green building, entertainment industry that would be compatible with housing. What process will be used to encourage the location within the city and attraction, development of clean industry impact, CRA planning's views on the compatibility of housing mixed use with industrial uses. So again, is it trying to get understanding of what we see as a city, what we'd like to invite, and how do we promote this compatibility given these changes that are occurring. And we have about 18 questions that we'll forward to you in a letter. The CLA will help me draft, and we'll get a response in 30 days.
Could I take maybe 2 minutes to respond to some of the things I heard?
Yes.
There were a couple of things or 3 things I want to sort of disagree or at least to try to clarify from my perspective. One is I have heard from several people that they believe that the analysis that we did of the land use constitutes some new policy, and I want to clarify and make it clear to folks that the look at the land use, the survey that we did is on a large scale exactly what we would do on a case-by-case basis. That is exactly the kind of thing we would look at for any project that came in and asked to be converted. So it is doing absolutely nothing different than we have always done and would always do. I heard someone say that they had either heard or they thought that we were not accepting applications for projects that were in the area that we had indicated should be preserved. That is not the case. We will always accept applications for zone changes. The ultimate decision is always the City Council, and so anyone can come in and apply for a zone change anywhere they want. So I want to make sure that people understand that.
So there is no moratorium?
There is absolutely no moratorium on anything, and there sort of never has been. We did say that from the beginning, we were going to be very careful during that 2-year period, but we in fact did convert land during that 2-year period. But of course, we are accepting applications and anyone can apply, and so I don't want anyone to think you can't come in and ask for a zone change.
Director Goldberg, if I may, I'd like to take that a step further. If there are council colleagues, and I'll ask them, if they are aware of any applicants that have been turned down or turned away, I'd like to get their name, the subject site that they are looking at, a date in which they were turned away or told, we don't advise you to do this. I really would like to put a list together and clear that ambiguity. I want to clear the air as to what we are doing as a city and how we are engaging these economic opportunities. So that to me is going to be critical.
The third thing that I would like to clarify, because I've heard it mentioned a couple of times that there are competing policies, that on the one hand there is a policy to enhance residential development downtown, and there's also this preservation of industrial land, so how can one pick one over the other? And I want to be clear with everyone, we never pick one over the other. Land use policy that is about housing refers to land that is designated for housing. That policy does not refer to land that is designated for anything else. Industrial land policy only impacts industrial land. So we are never using them or competing between the two land uses. Then I want to tell you the things I totally agree with. We absolutely understand the concern that everybody has that we want to preserve industrial land, but there isn't adequate infrastructure to support the jobs. We get that. And that is the kind of thing that we think needs to be addressed in the community plan. I also could not agree with you more that we need to have a thorough discussion of the jobs. What are the kinds of jobs that can be attracted? I don't believe, Council Member, that it is a citywide sort of strategy. And in fact, I think in each community, we need to think about what are the opportunities for the kind of land we have, because we are constrained by the size of the parcels, we are constrained by the size of the streets, and all of those things have to be considered. And we should be having, and I absolutely support that we should be having public discussions about who are the people who want to be here. What are the kinds of jobs that we have an advantage to get? And then we need to be realistic in the community planning process about how much land is needed for those jobs. So I could not agree with you more. I agree that we want to do wonderful industrial areas, and the conversions we want to also be wonderful. I hear you talk about the Pearl. I know the Pearl very well. It did not happen project by project. It happened with a very clear plan and real investment. And that's what I hope we can achieve through the community planning process. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Goldberg. Okay, any questions from my colleagues for the director or anything that's been said?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Goldberg, for your presentation. I actually got involved in this issue when a year ago the CRA and the Planning Department did put out its memo advocating that, well, asking staff to slow down on some of these conversions, and I, disagreeing with the direction that this was going, and put in a motion at that time to request that a certain portion of the Arts District that's currently under the Central City North Community Plan be included in the Arts District Community Plan. Because if we were to do that, we would allow a community that I saw on the verge of becoming a neighborhood through the various residential developments that had occurred in the area, to allow it to continue in that way, particularly because of the importance of its location. It's right near the river, where we hope to revitalize in the future. It would provide a link to the rest of downtown. 7th Street, in fact, in the future will be considered one of the linkages to the river from downtown. So I thought it would be a good idea to allow that to continue to move forward as a residential neighborhood. So the motion I put forward would allow it to go to the Arts District, which would not require anyone who would want to convert to get a general plan amendment, therefore making it easier for the conversion. However, I waited for the plan to come out to see what exactly was going to occur. Maybe we didn't have to move forward with this motion. But when the policy, the plan, whatever we want to call it, came forward, I saw that it did not include some of the areas that many of the people who live, work, and play in the area thought it would be a good idea to include as an ability to continue to create a neighborhood. It wasn't included. I thought it would be important to have a bigger discussion about what exactly this whole policy plan was and where it was going. So I think we've covered a lot. I think what Mr. Reyes has done today sets us on a good path to listen today, get some more questions out there, understand this a little bit better, come back in 30 days to move forward. However, I would request that we move forward on that one motion that I had proposed about a year ago, which would which would incorporate the certain portion of the Arts District in the Arts District Community Plan and out of the Central City North. The reason being, as we discussed earlier, is that the Central City North Community Plan, it'd be a bit longer. It's going to take a while to even get moving forward on that. And but I do have a question on that. So how long would it take? Let's say we move that motion forward and the council passes that motion, says we would like to do this. What's involved in that process and how long would it take?
Well, first of all, as you and I discussed, because Central City North is not actually being done right now, we hope to start it soon, and it is going to be a while. I think that this is a good compromise to move forward with your proposal to expand the art districts, because it is a real process. It will involve an EIR to look at the addition. I don't believe it will be a lengthy process because you already have a district. It's merely looking at the impact of moving the boundaries to a different location. The content of the arts district ordinance is in place. I have already talked to the redevelopment agency, who has said they will support me in doing that by helping to cover the cost of the environmental analysis. Good. So we will actually be starting that as soon as you direct that to be the case. I don't know exactly the time frame. I'm looking into how long the EIR will take. I am hopeful that it is a process that we can do in a 6-9 month period. If it's not that, I will get back to you quickly.
Okay. And that's good. And essentially what this will do is move down the boundary from the Arts District, the current community plan, from 6th Street to Violet. Why Violet, not 8th? Well, I originally thought of going up to 7th, but as some of the public speakers mentioned here, there are some residential developments already occurring between 7th and Violet as you go south, so I thought we should include that as well, since the goal of this is to create a neighborhood. And that's the current boundaries that I would hope, it's in my motion, I would hope I would receive my colleagues' support on that.
Absolutely, and if you, it's a good segue for us to go through the action items. On item 1, we can note and file the February 22nd, 2008 Planning Department clarification on the memorandum, inasmuch as it's been transmitted for informational purposes. We confer the motion to the CRA and the planning staff. Item 2, we refer to the planning and CRA staff. Number 3, we can note and file. Number 4, we refer to planning and CRA staff. Number 5, which is the motion you're referring to, Councilman Huizar, instructing the planning department to update the boundaries of the downtown arts district. I'd like to move that we adopt. We'll get a second on that. That'll fit the placeholder that we put forth so that we can act on that this week.
It'll be in council tomorrow.
It'll be in council tomorrow. And the rest are special items that we've already covered. And item 7, we don't have a report today, so that's fine. So that would be the action of this committee. We have a second, unanimous. So that'll take care of the adoption of that motion, so we can address the immediacy. Again, I see this as a beginning point, but I want to reach a certain level of certainty. I want to thank Director Goldberg for clarifying the fact that we do not have a moratorium. We don't want a de facto moratorium. want to make sure that the bureaucracy, both the planning department and CRA, understand that we do not support a de facto moratorium. We want to see these projects move forward with all the due diligence and discipline that the planning department and the CRA conduct their business. Mr. Spivak, there's anything you wanted to add, sir? The CRA is playing a big role in these areas, and I want to make sure we hear from you, sir.
No, sir, just that we appreciate the opportunity to participate in this process. It's been for us a very good working relationship with the planning department. We look forward to continuing collaboration with the department and with the council.
Spivak, one question in terms of this notion of creating these magnets and identifying desirable uses, potential businesses. Are we having that discussion internally in the CRA?
We're having discussions among the departments and with both planning department, CRA, other departments of the city and the mayor's office on looking at the types of businesses and the attraction of new businesses, as well as the identification of the appropriate nodes where it may be proper to try to create the environment for these types of business to locate.
Is the council staff within these districts part of that discussion?
They will be part of that discussion as it continues forward.
Okay, so will be?
Yes.
Okay, not yet?
Yes.
Okay, I want to make sure that they will be. Thank you, sir. Councilman?
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Spivak, as you heard right now, there's a certain section of the Arts District in my district that we're moving forward to include in the Arts District Community Plan, which would allow more conversions. We have one project, at least that I know of, that went through council, Section 245, that now is going to the CRA for approval because it's in a redevelopment zone. Would the appropriate notice be given now to the commission and the CRA department, giving them notice that we are moving in a certain direction so that in their findings they take that into account, even though we have not adopted the change in community plans yet?
We will make that information available. Now, any application that comes in within a redevelopment project area will have to be measured against the findings that the redevelopment plan requires. And so that process will still have to take place.
And that's my question, because although one of the findings I assume will be that it conforms to the community plan, but there are certain, there's one project coming to CRA which if you ask that question right now, technically it would not conform, but we're in the process of moving in that direction. So I would hope you take that into account. And
we will take that into account, but again, there are other findings under the redevelopment plan that also will have to be examined.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So again want to thank Director Wilbur for being here. I want to thank Roberto and the CLA for preparing the questions. There's about 18 questions we'll forward to you, Director. 30 days we'll review them. And we'll continue speaking to the stakeholders, the council offices. I anticipate the council offices will give me a clear sense of what industrial land should not be touched. In as so much that there's discretionary action within the general plan. We fold in the council's priorities, and I look forward to working with the mayor's office. Is anyone here from the mayor's office? I want to make sure we afford them the opportunity to speak as well, or if they would like to.
There was one speaker, no one from the mayor's office, but one additional speaker who turned their card in late, who actually said they had submitted one before we can take it to public comment, if you like to.
Okay, is that person here? Do they feel compelled to speak? Do you really, really want to speak? So you're okay? Okay, because I can see everybody holding their breath. Okay. All right, sir. Well, thank you so much, sir.
Don't forget the letter from...
Yeah. And we also have the letter from Councilman Perry's office. In it, there's some direct assertions and questions. I want to make sure that the planning department can respond to her letter as well. Okay, so that will be the action of this committee. Again, thank you for your patience, and hopefully we'll get some more clarity and build up the confidence and invest in the city. Thank you so much. Have a great day.